Welcome back to the Comics Cube, everyone. Today I'm joined by Power Comics' Austin Hough and Dakota Alexander. What's up, guys?
What
hey,
is
great
up?
to be here.
We're going to be talking about this Kickstarter that you have, the Masters #1, which is a classic superhero versus supervillain comic. But before we get to that, why do you love comics?
Why? My God, that's like asking me why I love my kids. I mean, there are so many reasons, right, Dakota? So many reasons.
Why you love your kids? I would imagine so.
That too. But come on, man. Comics, it's like, God, the first time I saw a spinner rack at the corner drugstore in the early 70s, I mean, it was like love at first sight. You know, all of these colors and beautiful superheroes and supervillains just popping out at you. You know, I mean, what is there not to love?
What made you fall in love with comics? Like, do you have any specific ones?
Me in particular?
Yeah.
Man, I have such a great origin story in that regard. I was 5 years old. It was 1974, and I was over at my grandmother. She was babysitting me, and she gave me 50 whole cents American. Okay, and that's 2 quarters, 2.25. That's right, 2 25-cent pieces. I walked down the busiest street in suburban Chicago, Ogden Avenue. I mean, cars racing all over the place. 5 years old. My grandma just let me go by myself, 5-6 blocks away.
We're not going to talk about how that's child endangerment, right?
What?
We're not going to talk about how that's essentially child endangerment.
Well, that's why we now wear helmets when we ride bikes with training wheels and all kinds of stuff.
All right.
But
all right, go on. Sorry.
I must have walked 5 or 6 blocks from her house to the drugstore to get a candy bar and to get a comic book. The candy bar I bought no longer is being produced. It was called a marathon bar. It was about 12 inches long. It was like woven together. It was really cool. That cost me $0.25. And the comic book I bought was Defenders #18, cover by Gil Kane, interiors by Sal Buscema. I still have that copy to this day. I still made it there and back alive. And about 50
to and from.
to and fro. And about 50 years later, here I am. I still have that comic.
That is not a common Gateway comic. That's interesting.
Well, it was just sitting there. And if you pull it up and look at the cover, all the superheroes are flying at the supervillains. It was the first appearance of the Wrecking Crew, which is probably my favorite villain team, probably because of just nostalgia. You know, I don't think anybody thinks they're the greatest villain team of all time, but I love that team. I make custom action figures, and I've made 2 different sets of them over the last 20 years.
Cool.
in different variant forms because I love them so much. I just think they're just near and dear to my heart.
Dakota.
Defenders 17, right?
What?
Defenders 17?
Defenders 18. I'll look it up.
No, yeah, I'm going to it.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Let me see if I can do a quick share screen.
That's a lot. Yeah. I'll just flash it on the screen when this goes up. But yeah, that's 4 Defenders versus the Wrecking Crew.
Yeah, you're 5 years old and you see that image in a spinner rack at eye level. It was all over for me.
I get that. Dakota, tell me your origin story.
Okay. I was going to just ask him a quick question about this. Now, some of these characters you probably had heard of at some point, like maybe through cartoons or anything.
The Hulk specifically?
You know?
Probably the Hulk, and he's the main figure on the cover. Right. And you gotta love the Gil Kane version of the Hulk. He has his hair parted in the center and combed back.
Oh.
I mean, almost like a Farrah Fawcett dude. You know what I mean?
No, nobody spent that much time on Hulk's abs except for Gil Kane, really.
It's feathered. It's just beautiful.
Who does his grooming? This is the Hulk. Does he get a comb? And
so like he hulks out, but he stops for a second. Hang on. Hulk
Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange.
Anyone have product?
Doctor Strange stops him and says, "Hey, Hulk, comb your freaking hair, will you? You look awful." But no, the Hulk, if you remember back in the late 60s, they had those Marvel cartoons
Yeah.
which were Hulk, Iron Man, Submariner, Thor, and Iron Man.
Yep.
That's
Those
where
are
I saw.
great.
Yeah,
I mean that unironically. Those are great.
Yeah,
they're just motion comics essentially.
that's exactly right. You took the words out of my mouth. Motion comics, and those, and it was 1974 when this comic book came out, and a year earlier was the debut of the Super Friends on Saturday morning cartoons. So that was big for me. Not to mention we had reruns of the Adam West Batman live action.
Right.
We also had the reruns in the early 70s of the 67 animated Spider-Man.
Okay. So,
but this cover just stood out to me, and it was like, wow, 25 cents, I'm getting it.
Sure.
And then the lady at the counter, I'll never forget this. She tried to charge me a penny tax. And I'm like, listen, lady, I've got 50 cents. I've got 2 quarters. I don't have an extra penny. And she's like, okay, kid. And she let me walk.
Okay, 5-year-old.
Okay, 5-year-old. I mean,
unless you want to give me 24 cents in pennies.
She was strict.
I guess.
that was somebody
I'm gonna get my extra penny out of this kid who's not even old enough to go to grade school. Like, what is the deal with that?
That was somebody who thought their job was way more important than it really was.
Nobody rides for free in this candy store, I guess.
Nobody rides for free. There's no such thing as a free lunch, Dakota.
Yeah, I know you're 5.
Dakota.
Hey, I'm sorry. I was just gonna brag a little bit. I just refreshed the Kickstarter. It's over 22,200 right now, with
awesome.
5 days to go.
Awesome.
Well done. This man is a machine. He's an absolute machine.
Never stop working, right, Dakota?
Never stop working. Well, you don't sleep, so that probably helps. So mine is kind of the same way, but I would say that whereas Austin has a specific moment, mine was kind of, I don't remember a time when I really wasn't connected to superheroes and comics, though I believe the first comic I probably ever got, I think, was an A-Team that Marvel put out. It was an A-Team, one of the earlier issues, and B.A. Baracus fought a sumo wrestler. And I remember just the cover of it. But beyond that, it was like he had those cartoons. I had those cartoons and Spider-Man, 81 Spider-Man, 79 Spider-Woman.
Underrated cartoon, the 81 Spider-Man.
81 Spider-Man. I preferred, well, I don't know. His voice was much more, it felt like it was much more New York in a way. But I do like the Amazing Friends voice too. I think they're all just really great. I've been introducing my son, who's gonna turn 4 on the 19th. So for the past year and change, I've been introducing him to Spider-Man: The Amazing Friends as his gateway into the character, and they are fantastic for that age group because nothing's extreme. Everything's very, very, tame. There's not really violence, but it's fun. And all those shows, even back to the 60s and definitely 67 Spider-Man, I grew up on that as well. They're all just, they're incredibly steeped in the lore, lots of Easter eggs, really great way to be introduced to it. So from that point on, when I started reading anything, I was reading comics. And it's never really, it's always been something that is just part of me. And I took a step away from it, when I was in my late teens and early 20s. And then when I moved here to Japan, I wasn't able to really, get back into it until I got into Marvel Unlimited. But you never really give it up. I don't think you do.
No, you never do. You're absolutely right. And I nominate Dakota Alexander for Father of the Year. Just saying. Hey, a fun fact about that 1981 animated Spider-Man. And I do prefer the voice used in the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends over the 81 Spider-Man. But there is one episode of that Spider-Man show from 1981 that is no longer available for streaming on Disney. And it's an episode that shows Nazi imagery because Captain America guest stars with the Red Skull.
Oh man, not that episode. That's a really great episode.
Yep, it's the one where they mistaken a Nazi symbol, or they mistake a symbol for a Nazi thing, and there's a teacher involved, one of Peter's professors.
No. That's not. I know the one you're talking about. That's actually not Captain America, but it is the Red Skull. And the teacher has these special powers, that are, he becomes like a jaguar god. It's a really vague blend of Mesoamerican and Native American. I just kind of threw it together. So it's not, it can run offensive on a number of levels, I suppose.
81 was a great year.
So
but that's the one that is no longer available through the Disney Plus app. The one with Captain America, I think that's the one. It was one of the last ones where J. Jonah Jameson was giving Captain America Parade. That one is still available. It's the other one with the professor that is not.
I want to say it has the Kingpin in it. No, the one with Captain America. No.
The one. Okay, so that's Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. That has the Kingpin, but the original Spider-Man one is just Captain America, and he gets captured, and it's actually a two-parter, and then Spidey has to go and get him, if I'm not mistaken. I love that one because I always remember when Cap shows up, he does this really cool thing where he throws the shield and it bounces off like 2 or 3 trees, and he like does a flip and catches it, and I was like 5 or 6, and you're just like, wow. Yep. And it's got some pretty good animation. That's when they started using some Japanimation, Japanese animators. They would go back and forth like between animation for those episodes.
That's one thing I loved in the Marvel movies, is that with Captain America throwing his shield, they just kept that whole thing where it doesn't obey the laws of physics. It's like, it's going to bounce off here, and here, and it's going to come right back at him. And we're never going to explain it.
In Civil War, Spidey's just like, that thing doesn't obey the laws of physics at all, does it? And we just all move on from that
point. Dakota, what is there a specific comic that made you start drawing?
No, but I will tell you the point when it all kind of changed. So I've always been drawing, and it's kind of in the drawing abilities is kind of genetic. My mother can do it, and her mother, they're all like very inclined to do it. My sister, who's 4 years older than me, she was very good. Used to drive me crazy when I was like a little kid. But when I was 8, I was looking at a volume 1 trade paperback of the Handbook of the Marvel Universe Deluxe Edition, Mike Zeck, Joseph Rubinstein's Captain America, and I just started sketching it.
It's a good Captain America.
It's so good.
Hey guys, you mentioned the Marvel Universe Handbook.
Yeah.
You guys want to see something cool?
Started to fall into place. What am I looking at?
That is a 4 foot by 4 foot poster of all of the Marvel Universe Handbook covers.
Right.
Okay. I was able to get this. There was a comic book store in a suburban Chicago that was being relocated. They were destroying the building. And I walked in, it was just perfect timing. And I said, hey, you getting rid of some of these things? I'll take that poster. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, sure. I think I got it for $10.
That's amazing.
It's cool.
It had to be about 15 to 20 years ago if it was a day.
Easily.
It's the Ed Hannigan, Joe Rubinstein versions of all the covers. Right. So they're all like running in one direction.
Right.
Very cool.
I was able to sort of kind of make the relationship between understanding shapes and things like that to be able to actually draw. And then once I could do it, then it was over, because I was going to just draw. And I moved around a lot as a kid. So I was also kind of an inside kid. So I spent a lot of time doing that. And then most of my love for comics also was following artists, John Byrne, Art Adams, George Perez, Neil Adams. So I was very, very in tune with them. And speaking of the Marvel Universe, also having those, you learn the names of these guys.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier to follow them around, and then you have the panels. from the individual issues and stuff like that. So that's really, I would say my love of comics is definitely connected to the art itself, more so than the writing, though. That's always something that I enjoy as well.
Speaking of the writing, Austin, I believe that at the age of 50, you decided you would start writing comics. What led to this decision?
Yeah, you know what? It's crazy. Well, what happened? I mean, it's simple, yet it's such a long story. I'll try to shorten it as much as possible. But you know, my big hobby has been for about the last 25 years making custom Mego style action figures. And I'm one of the most prolific custom Mego action figure makers in the world. I'm very well known, not to toot my own horn, but I'm a big fish in a very, very little pond. I mean, very little pond.
I've seen his collection. It is insane. It's everything. It's everything.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. But I was running, I made close to 700 different custom Mego action figures. My whole point was, you know, when I was a kid, Mego had a short lifespan and they only made a finite amount of characters. They didn't make Dr. Doom or Lex Luthor or Daredevil or Hawkman or Green Lantern. So I wanted to make them. So when I became an adult and rediscovered Megos and rediscovered my collection in my mom and dad's attic, I started doing research on the internet. I found the MegoMuseum.com. I found a bunch of people who were making custom action figures like I always wanted to. And I just jumped in feet first. And the next thing I knew, it's, you know, 2020, I've got about 700 characters and 7 variations of Spider-Man and 10 variations of Batman and 12 Green Lanterns and so on and so forth. And all these crazy obscure villains. I made the Circus of Crime. I made the Death Throes. I've
Royal
made
Flush Gang.
the Royal Flush Gang. Yeah, there you go. I have made all kinds of different obscure villains that only had one appearance. Like I made an appearance called I made a villain called Hot Shot, which appeared in a Hostess Twinkie ad with Spider-Man back in like 1978.
Yes.
I just thought he was cool and I wanted to make him. So
good.
Cool.
So back in like around 1998 or so, I came up with an idea for a villain that I thought would be really cool on the old Adam West Batman show. And he was inspired by Salvador Dali. I named him Surreal Ordeal as a tribute to surrealism. And I took a Dali-esque type of a character, put a beret on him, a smock. I gave him a palette of magic paint and a brush. And his power was he could paint himself out of any room, any situation he was in. So if he was robbing a bank and he was surrounded by guards, he just goes and paints a painting on the wall similar to a surrealistic thing, and he jumps into it and escapes. It was like a portal. And you know, how cool is that? And who's going to run after that guy? Chief O'Hara? Commissioner Gordon? No effing way. It had to be Batman and Robin, right? So, you know, I forgot about this guy. I created him in my mind like 20 some years ago, and I'm running out of action figures to make. So I thought to myself, oh my God, I remember I made this, created this villain in my head. And I decided, okay, I'm going to make Surreal Ordeal into an action figure. I made him. I loved him. I'm like, wow, this is great. But he needs some buddies. He needs a team, man. He needs to be like part of the Legion of Doom or something like that. Right. So I just started making a list of all of my favorite artists, you know, Rene Magritte, Andy Warhol, Ansel Adams, Pablo Picasso, and on and on and on. And I chose 4 more artists that were favorites of mine, but also I felt I could transform into something that would look really cool visually if I made an action figure. So I chose the characters. I mean, you could see them all over there, right?
In that Stephen Butler cover.
That's the Stephen Butler cover. Yeah, God bless that guy. He is an amazing artist.
I love him. Yeah, he's great.
He is amazing. He really is. But if you take a look from top to bottom, there is Rene Magritte's The Clerk, Salvador Dali inspired Surreal Ordeal, Keith Haring inspired Graffiti, Ansel Adams inspired Panorama, and Toulouse-Lautrec inspired Monsieur Petit Renard, which means Mr. Little Fox in French. So from there, I'm looking at these action figures. I love them because they're my creations. You know, it's the first time I've created something and I haven't, you know, copied something. So I'm looking at these guys and I'm thinking, well, man, I got to come up with backstories for these dudes, because if I post these on the internet, nobody's going to know who the hell they are. They're going to be like, oh, that's great, Austin. Good work. Who are they? And, you know, I've got a reputation to think about. I'm like the most prolific ego customizer in the world. So I put together backstories on them. And I'm like, okay, now I can present them and let people know who they are. And I came up with everything from, you know, their origin stories to their names, you know, their relatives, their superpowers, all this stuff. And then I thought to myself, wow, man, these guys are such a cool group. I could probably come up with a really neat comic book story. And I did. I put them in the Batman universe. I had them in a Brave and the Bold style theme where Batman would fight each one with a guest superhero. So Batman and Green Arrow would take on Surreal Ordeal, or Batman and Hawkman would take on the Clerk, and so on and so forth. Then I thought, oh man, I've got the perfect leader for this group. And I grabbed this character out of 19th century literature that, you know, I brought back to life, that everybody presumes is dead. I bring him back to life. If we can bring Superman back to life, we can bring this guy back to life. Okay.
Death is so impermanent at this point.
Right? Death is so not
cares
right. Right. So I brought this guy back to life. He is the big reveal in the story. The story is great because it has a big reveal and it has a double cross. Dakota knows both, but he is sworn to secrecy.
There's a blood oath, which was weird because we had to do it over the internet. It was weird.
Yeah, well, you could do anything over fiber optic cables.
All right, so, into the USB port.
Right. I think you could lose your virginity over the internet now too.
Oh gosh.
But anyway, I come up with this story. I have these action figures. And, you know, I'm just a classic Bronze Age story guy. And this is my love letter to the Bronze Age. And all I want, you know, I just want good storytelling. That's what I want. I don't need, you know, somebody to preach to me. I don't need to have, you know, crazy stuff going on that I have no connection to. I just want a good story. Bad guys and good guys, cops and robbers, maybe a little bit of a twist. That's great. You know, maybe make you think a little bit, you know, like how's this going on? So I have a good friend who works for DC Comics, Art Baltazar.
Yeah,
and
great.
Art and I have been really good friends for about 15, 16 years, and we get together about every 2 or 3 months for lunch. We only live about an hour or so away from each other. So we pick a place halfway between, so a 30-minute drive each way for both of us. And one day I brought my action figures with me, and I brought my script with me, or I should say my plot summary. And we're sitting there and he's looking at all this stuff. And he's like, wow, Austin, I love these action figures. I love these characters. I love the plot summary. This is great. He's like, you know what? I think we could pitch this to Dan DiDio, the publisher of DC Comics, at C2E2 in February. And I'm like, wow, this is great. So this is about February of 2020, right? So
let's just put that into context right there.
Yeah. So of course, 2 weeks later,
there we go.
Dan is let go, right? Dan is let go. 250 people at DC Comics are laid off. Art doesn't know who he's supposed to report to, let alone who I should be talking to. So I kind of shelved the thing for a little bit, and I have to, like, you know, regroup and rethink. And it's like, okay, I can just put it in a drawer and forget about it and say, oh, you know what? I had a professional comic book artist tell me that it was great and I should have it published and blah, blah, blah. Or I can actually incorporate a publishing company, self-publish, go to Kickstarter or Indiegogo or whatever, crowdfund this thing and have it see the light of day. And I chose that route. And the next thing I knew, I was doing research, trying to figure out, okay, how do I incorporate? How do I get a Kickstarter going? How do I get artists? It's like, I'm the writer, but how do I get artists? And who do I want to get? And how do I get them? Next thing I knew, I was getting them, man. They were just lining up. It was the most wonderful thing.
Yeah, how'd that happen? I was going to ask about that.
Well, through all the research that I did, and I have a bunch of friends who self-publish, and you know, they go to Kickstarter and Zoop and Indiegogo, and I just asked him, I said, hey, what did you guys do? How do I get artists to do this? I'm not the artist. I can't draw. I can, draw stick figures, but I can't, actually draw. So they said, well, listen, who do you want to get? They said. And I said, oh, I'd love to get George Perez, and I'd love to get John Byrne, and I'd love to get, so-and-so and so-and-so. And they're like, well, none of the guys that you want to get, none of the guys that you grew up with, the Bronze Age guys, the Silver Age guys, none of those guys really want to do sequential art anymore. None of them want to do interior pages. They're on the Comic-Con circuit. They're doing commissions. They'll probably draw you a cover, but they're not going to want to do the sequential art.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. You're 100% correct. And they said, what you really need to do is to just reach out to those guys, because the pandemic was just starting. And they're like, these guys are sitting at home. They're probably doing nothing. They're probably just waiting to get, commissions. Reach out to them, see if they'll do a cover for you, and then find lesser known, but equally talented artists to do the sequential art, some kids that are fresh out of art school or whatever. And I'm like, okay, that's what I'll do. So I reached out to Joe Rubinstein. Joe Rubinstein, for my money, he's on the Mount Rushmore of greatest living inkers of all time.
The guy inked like the latter half of the Bronze Age for Marvel is all Joe Rubinstein. All of the Marvel Universe stuff. The guy is like he put his stamp. Him and Terry Austin put their stamps on inking in the 80s.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. Terry Austin and Joe Rubinstein on the Mount Rushmore of living inkers. So I had become friendly with Joe Rubinstein a few years ago at a Comic-Con in Milwaukee. I had met him with Art Baltazar. We went up there to see the con. It was like an hour and a half from our homes. So we drove up together, went to the con. Joe Rubinstein was there. Stéphane Roux was there. Alex Saviuk was there. All three are now working with me on this comic book, coincidentally. So I reached out to Rubinstein and I said, hey, Joe, I've got this idea for a comic book. I want to get some covers inked by you, but I want them drawn by these guys. And I know you're friends with them. Can you put me in touch with Alan Weiss, Kerry Gammill, and Ron Wilson? And he said, yeah, sure. Sounds like fun. Send me what you want me to email them. So I did. And the very next day I received an email back from Alan Weiss. Now, Alan Weiss, I mean, his sketches look like finished work by most people. Okay, this guy is so talented, it's not even funny. And he sends me an email and says, Austin, I like this idea for your story. I'm big into all of these artists. Toulouse-Lautrec happens to be my all-time favorite artist. Here's my phone number. Give me a call. I live in Chicago just like you. I'm like, okay. I call him up, and about, 3.5 hours later, right? That's how long the phone call lasted. He is like, Austin, you've got me for a cover, but I need to ask you a favor. And I'm like, what the heck kind of a favor is Alan Weiss going to ask me, right? He said, I really love the Toulouse-Lautrec inspired character. And I love the fact that you took this famous artist who's 4 feet 8 inches tall. You gave him no painting superpowers like you gave the other guys. You made him this master assassin, master of the martial arts, master weapons expert. I'd love to draw that character's chapter. And all of a sudden I'm like, what? You want to draw a chapter? I mean, it went against everything everybody had been telling me, right?
Right.
No sequential art. They'll just do a commission piece and that's it. Alan Weiss completely flipped the script on me. So I'm sitting there thinking, who am I to say no to Alan Weiss, right? So I say, absolutely, have at it, dude. So I sent him a bunch of reference material. And this was at, like 10 o'clock at night. I go to bed because I'm an early riser. Alan, he was just getting up. Next thing I knew, I woke up, I went on my computer, and in my inbox are sketches of Monsieur Petit Renard from Alan Weiss. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Because remember, up until this point, I just had the action figure. That's it. Okay. So in his email, he's like, here's some sketches. Hope you like them. Oh, and by the way, by this time, you have to remember, I had swapped out all the DC characters, Batman, Green Arrow, Hawkman, with public domain Golden Age heroes. So, because I can't put Batman in my comic book. Right. So I swapped out him for the Black Owl from the public domain Golden Age 1940s. Well, since he was going to be the main character and he was going to have a guest hero in every chapter, the guest hero for the Renard chapter was a guy named Twister. Because I originally had Red Tornado guesting with Batman, I needed a tornado guy. Alan sends me back the sketches of Renard. And then he says in the email, hey, I see you've got Twister as your partner with the Black Owl in this chapter. He's like, can I reimagine him and change him and whatever? And then again, here I am sitting in my computer thinking, who am I to say no to Alan Weiss? So I reply, have at it, brother, have at it. The next day I wake up again, I've got sketches of this reimagined Twister in my email box. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, Alan Weiss has completely flipped the script on me. He's like, he'll do a cover. He's going to do an interior chapter. He is going to recreate one of the superheroes. And he eventually ended up reimagining the Black Owl as well. So the Black Owl over here is completely Alan's reimagining, drawn by Stephen Butler. Now,
I was going to ask, yeah, because he looks really modern and then not a golden ager. Yeah.
Yeah. No, he looks at least as if he came out of the Bronze Age. And still that costume is great in the modern era. So Alan completely flips the script on me, and I get the idea like, okay, I am going to approach my favorite comic book artists, and I'm going to offer them, 1, the villain of their choice, 2, a cover, 3, the interior chapter that goes with that villain of their choice, and 4, I'm going to offer them complete creative freedom of reimagining the guest hero in that chapter. All of a sudden, Ron Wilson says yes. Bob Hall says yes. Alex Saviuk says yes. Arvell Jones says yes. Bob Hall had to drop out, so I contacted Val Mayerik at the behest of Alan Weiss, and he said yes. And all of a sudden, I had all my chapters ready, lined up. Now, outside of the chapters, there's still a lot of other, script that has to be filled. Well, everybody was like, once I had all of these guys lined up, getting everybody else was pretty much easy. All of a sudden, everybody's like, oh, you've got Alan Weiss, Ron Wilson, Val Mayerik, Arvell Jones, and Alex Saviuk? Where do I sign up? And I ended up getting Mike Lilly, Bart Sears, Pat Broderick, Romeo Tanghal, Stéphane Roux, Tom Grummett, just on and on. Alan Milgrom, he was one of the first guys I contacted to do inking because he's one of my favorites of all time.
Jimmy Palmiotti.
Jimmy Palmiotti. There's a great story about Jimmy Palmiotti. I'll tell in a little bit about my relationship with Jimmy. It goes back about 20 years. Oh. But yeah, Jimmy Palmiotti doesn't ink anymore. He's promised to ink 2 pages for me, one by Tom Grummett and one by his friend Stéphane Roux. Right. Tom Morgan joined the team. Stephen Butler, Mike Grell, Ramona Fradon, Pablo Marcos, Mike Vosburg.
I can't believe you got Ramona Fradon.
Well,
she's pushing 100, and I'm like, how?
I can't believe.
Is she by Chicago? Did you just go and visit her personally?
No. She's up in, I believe she's in upstate New York or New England. But what I did was I contacted her agent, and I thought it was a long shot because what I wanted to do was I wanted her to take, because we have a stretchy superhero named Plimo in our story, I wanted her to do an homage to one of her old Plastic Man comic book covers. And I thought it was a long shot. I'm like, is she or her agent going to approve doing a character she has no familiarity with, and with all of my original characters in the shot as well? And I was shocked when they said, yeah, we'll do it. Here's the price. And I'm like, no problem. Boom, money sent.
Cool.
There's a running theme too with a lot of the approach to this project is that it very much is a love letter to comic books. And so you have a lot of the pinups will be homages. So just like that Masters, that Stephen Butler Masters, that's an homage to Jim Aparo. Mike Grell's is an homage to the original cover that Airman was on. So everything is working very much.
Bart Sears. Bart Sears' cover is
he homaged himself, which is what I would do if I was Bart Sears.
Right.
Because I mean, you know.
I'm glad.
There's this Al Milgrom homaged himself too when he did the David Letterman cover on what was it, the Marvel Avengers. Team Up or something like that. That's right.
It was Avengers.
Yep.
That was what was that? The editors week, or like
right, assistant editors week.
Assistant editors week. That's right. So and very much in the same respect as like the stuff that I do too. It feels actually more comfortable to just homage, because that's kind of what this project is really about. It's not about trying to break new ground as much as it's trying to celebrate as far as things have gone and what everyone's kind of enjoying.
Dakota, you're doing Who's Who pages for this.
Yeah, so that was, I'm not saying I was one of the first people that he ever contacted, but I know that I was in the beginning of it. Austin came to me in end of summer, fall of 2020. And he'd actually bought some prints of something that I was doing. I did a series of Spider Heroes. It was the same image of a Spider-Man fighting a Green Goblin, but I did it over the course of the many eras of Spider-Man. So it's Romita style classic Spidey versus Green Goblin. It's the 1980s. It's Ron Friend style versus Hobgoblin. It's the 1990s. It's Bagley versus, Scarlet Spider versus Demogoblin. And so he contacted me. He's like, I want to get the whole thing. And I'm like, really? Because there's like 6 or 7 prints of this. And I'm like, yeah, sure. So we worked out like a bulk rate, and then he contacted me.
I still think you overcharged me.
That's nice. Because I really. So you're face to face and you want to do this with me now? You just wanted to tell me to my face that I charge too much money. That's what he really wanted to do right now.
I absolutely love that series of Spider-Man prints, and I'm going to tell you why. Because they are like so consistently awesome. It's like it's essentially the same pose with different goblins and different Spider-Men, and it's great. It lines up with my psyche. I just love the way he presented it, and I couldn't wait to get that from him. And it was the smartest thing I ever did, making contact with Dakota Alexander. I mean, he has been such an important part of this project.
It was interesting because I had the pandemic has been very odd for me because it actually was a boost in business, which is ironic. I'd been in touch with a guy earlier named Mike Finn. Mike Finn also knows Austin through all the different channels. And Mike Finn had me do some variants for his project, Liberty Brigade. So when Austin brought this up, he's like, I want to use public domain characters. I was already kind of like aware of how this worked and what it was able to do. Because Mike Finn was also getting like, Ron Friends and Joe Rubinstein and Alan Davis. And it really kind of brought to my attention that this is sort of this new opportunity for a lot of guys who, as Austin was saying, they're just doing the comic circuit. They're just doing pinups, but this is their chance to kind of enjoy being back in the game and telling some stories and doing stuff that's really kind of very simple and fun, because this kind of stuff is, it's not about like trying to shake things up. It's just like good guys and bad guys, threat assessment, real, just like problem solving. And it doesn't need to, it's very compressed. And, but moving on from that, he comes up to me and he's like, Austin contacts me. He's like, I want to do these characters. These are the characters I want to do. And he first comes to me with his characters, which is like, okay, this is very, very different. All right. And he's like, I want to do them like Marvel Universe. The very simple. You have your rectangle, you have your standing pose, and then you'll do the info that way.
Yeah, just simple model sheets was what I was looking for.
Right. And I was like, we can do that, but I have an idea. And I'd done this with another guy about a year prior who came to me with his original character. And I was like, he wanted to do a model sheet. And I was like, what if you tried it like the Who's Who? Do you know about that? And so I did something for this guy, a couple years ago. But when I said it to Austin, Austin's like, I love the Who's Who. I have every single Who's Who's issue. And I'm like, really? Because I'm like, I just recently I brought them with me today. I'm about 4 issues short, and I went and checked every single one that I'm actually short on. But anyways, so because the thing that the Who's Who did, I mean, Marvel Universe is really great, but Who's Who was a lot more fun. It was a lot more. They were like really pinups. They had these collages. It didn't have to be overly technical, and it, sometimes it was almost too simplistic, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I was like, what if we do it like that? And he was completely on board. So that was it. We started off, we just worked out like, what do we need to do? Who do we need to do? And it started off with the masters themselves. And then we got to move into the heroes, the public domain characters. And that was when like I started getting, information from like Alan Weiss, Val Mayerik, and all of them. Just real quick, I don't know, Duy, are you familiar with the public domain characters that we're using?
Actually, no. I know they're public domain characters, but I don't think they're I don't think I've heard of these guys.
All right, so real quick, there's all a correlation to every DC character you have. So you have Black Owl for Batman, and they're all, by the way, they're all more or less inspiration to what we have now as DC characters, because this whole thing, like it all feeds off itself. So you have Black Owl for Batman. Basic premise, still the same thing, no sidekick. You have Twister, which is
the Red Tornado.
You have Arrow, which is
Green Arrow.
You have Flyman, which is Atom. And then you have Airman, which is Hawkman. And there's obviously different similarities. Obviously, Airman is not from Thanagar. And Ron Wilson's Airman is a beast. He's like fully armored.
Metal wings.
Dude, it's nuts. Like that was the one where I was just like, wow. The most out of them was just like all the other characters, like they've got like their costumes and stuff. And then Airman is just this like gigantic monstrosity. He's got like talons coming off of his shoulders. And I'm like, all right, wow. He must be fun to talk to in a party. Always has a helmet on. But when that came through, like that was when the Masters was really interesting, because it was like, all right, this is a big challenge to work with. And these guys have a huge backstory. So with Who's Who, you've got to give insight to that. You've got to do your, your headshot. If you wear a mask, you need to have a headshot. If you don't wear a mask, you don't need one. But then you've got to like give all this information. And it was a big process. And then when we got into the public domain characters, it was a lot more streamlined, because then they were kind of more established. You didn't have to do as much with it. But that was the big thing. It's some of the harder work that I've ever probably done because of how invested it gets. And then after that, we have like all the other things that we're doing, that we're making for the Kickstarter. We have lunch boxes, we have trading cards. So getting these characters done in these sheets allows us to have the house style and the house imagery, kind of like how Marvel would have, or like the DC style guide. Yeah, the Jose Garcia Luis
Garcia Lopez.
Thank you. JLGL. I don't remember.
Yeah.
His stuff, when he did the style guide, that was all merchandise for like the next, 8 or 9 years in DC. Yep. And the stuff that I was doing was kind of being like able to be transferred to making 7-Eleven cups and lunch boxes. So it was real important that we got this stuff like out as quickly as possible. So I was working pretty fast to make that happen as well. Whereas the other guys, they're doing a lot more work, but mine's kind of boots on the ground kind of stuff. So when we were on the phone initially, and he was talking and Austin was talking to me about this, it was all very conceptual. Like, I'm going to try and see if I can get ... Alan Weiss was the very beginning of it, and that was when he would, the way he was talking to me was like, I can't believe this is actually happening, and it was very surreal. And then
Surreal ordeal.
It's surreal. Every now and then
That's
I would
funny.
get these quick messages like, Val Meyerik's on the project. I'm like, really? Mike Gustavich is interested.
Yeah, Mike Gustavich. There's another guy we forgot to mention, right?
Boom. And it would just be these continuous, like, you know, and because of the time difference, it'd be like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, Mike Gustavich, awesome.
Oh my God.
You know, like I'm like, Heart, that's an amazing thing. Talk to me in 3 days. But yeah, so I've been seeing this thing grow to an immense level. And that's the thing that that the Comic-Cons are really able to convey, but on the internet and social media doesn't really get it across as well, is that how big this thing is. There's just so many people. Like you go through like the list, he's got a banner that almost goes up to his ceiling of just people that are like, you know, that are all a part of this project. And every single one of them is someone that I've known as a kid. And I'm working on a project with people that I've known own comics that they've done. And I cannot believe that I'm a part of this. I cannot.
Not only that, Dakota, you're not just working on a project with other people involved that you've been fans of forever, but they are seeing your work and they're using it as reference material. Dakota Alexander's work on this project is the foundation of the entire project. The entire Who's Who pages, they go out to everybody. Everybody who comes out of this project, that's what they get as their model sheets. This is the Black Owl. This is Surreal Ordeal. This is everybody. And they're all from that guy right there. He is the foundation for this entire project. No.
Oh, the other guy.
You right there. There you go. So I cannot
awesome.
put a value on Dakota's worth on this project.
I bet he can't even articulate how it's got to be out of this world, Dakota.
Well, okay. I'll make it very, very simple and very quick. This is Who's Who Volume 5, Update 87. This is by Pablo Marcos. Pablo Marcos is doing the wraparound for our version of Who's Who.
That's right.
It's like that. And he's like, Pablo Marcos. And I'm like, wait a minute. Wait, you mean this dude?
Right.
I got back into drawing in 2013. I was on a big hiatus from it. And I just like learned Photoshop and got back into it. And in the past year and a half, 2 years now, it's just been the craziest thing ever, because I'm now on these projects with people who created what I do. Like I don't get, I'm at the tail end of the Bronze Age. He's in the prime of the Bronze Age, and working with guys that like influenced all of our perception about comics. It's the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
And cool. I'll end it on that note.
One of the coolest side effects of this whole thing has been the little competitions I can see and feel between the artists. I will send out emails, and Dakota knows all about this because he's on the email chain. Yeah. But I'll send out stuff like, oh, look what Alan Weiss did. I just wanted to show everybody his pages. And you know that these guys are on the other end of these email chains saying, oh my God, I've got to match stroke for stroke with Alan Weiss. And all of a sudden
they're like, all right.
I'm going to one up you. It's just, it's amazing. There's so much pride and there's so much competition. It's all unspoken competition, but these guys, they keep raising the bar. Some of these guys, I would say almost all of them, what they're doing now in terms of art is probably the best stuff they've ever done. I've even mentioned it to a few of them. And, these guys are getting up there in ages. They're in their late 60s, early 70s. Pablo Marcos is over 80. Ramona is in her 90s. And the stuff they're doing is just the best stuff I think they've ever produced. And I've told them this, and their response is, well, I've really had the time to hone my craft, one.
Yeah.
Two, and I think this might be the most important thing, is that they're not under all of these crazy deadlines with these crazy amount of work they need to do.
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
so they
like,
can take their time.
That's actually a running theme when I've been doing these interviews, is that I realize a lot of these artists, if we think a comic book looks like the artist isn't good, a lot of the time it's because the artist was rushed.
Oh yeah.
Right.
It's because sometimes you'll see them post a drawing on Facebook and it's incredible.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And conversely too, like the old adage, when you talk to anyone, like, some people want to talk about like Vince Coletta. Vince Coletta is like the punching bag for a lot of people.
That's so funny you mentioned him. I was just thinking about him.
Well, he's the one you think about with that. And
right.
You can take criticism towards what he did, but everyone in the business is like, hey, he made his deadlines. And deadlines are the key to all of it in this business. Because that's, it's print media, and it's on a schedule. And they all respect that. It's like, hey man, you make your deadlines, I got nothing more to say about it. But if they were all given the time that they could, like these guys are right now, it's you just have the opportunity for them to produce. Also, I have a theory, and maybe Austin can back this up, and I don't want to go much further because you're being really great with this, Duy.
No, I'm thinking about the dude who has to eat breakfast.
Oh no, dude, I'm withering away to mildly obese over here. I'm fine.
You are fine.
Yeah, go ahead, Dakota.
Man. All right. I have a feeling. So when I saw this, and I saw the Liberty Brigade as well.
Yeah.
I had this feeling that I thought a lot of these guys are getting inspired to do work again. Like working. Maybe comics is not comics as it is right now. Mainstream comics is not necessarily. I mean, it's definitely not what it was, for sure. But also, it's not necessarily what they want to do out of it. And I think some of these projects that are just simple and fun, and they're not an incredible level of commitment, and they're certainly not on a deadline. This gives these people the idea, the chance to kind of get re-inspired a little bit.
Yeah.
Like Spider-Man is this kind of Spider-Man now. And maybe that's not the Spider-Man that they want to necessarily do. But here you give them like Black Owl, or you give them the guys over in the Liberty Brigade, Comet, or the original Daredevil. And now they're like, hey man, just go with it.
Right.
And now suddenly they have a little bit more control. They have something that, is just a little bit more fun. Because deep down inside, I think these people still want to make stuff.
Yeah.
I want to make stuff all the time. And I think I'm going to want to make stuff until I basically can't.
Right.
So I really think that what Austin has given a lot of these artists who are no longer interested in doing sequential art are opportunities to kind of be excited about something. And that's what I think is really great about this project. I think it's just, you see a lot of passion in it,
Yeah, you can totally see it.
Yeah, man. It's just wonderful to hear him talk about like how these guys are excited to do the project, where he thought he'd be like, basically on his knees begging them to do it, and they're actually excited. That's a switch, man.
Yeah.
And it's something
I completely agree.
It's hard to convey via like Facebook or social media. Like, don't you get it? This is something really important. But slowly but surely, especially because of the way Austin's been handling this, like it's making its goals, because it's getting out there to the people, and the people are the ones who are really, really starting to understand how great this is.
Yeah.
By the way, I want to give a shout out to Darryl Banks. Darryl Banks is also is he doing the buttons, Austin?
No, Darryl Young.
Darryl Young. I'm sorry, not Darryl Banks. Darryl Young. Is he doing the buttons?
Correct.
Oh man, this guy is. I learned about this guy just before the project, and I've become like buds with this dude. This guy is something really special. Darryl Young, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry to Darryl Banks, you're amazing, but Darryl Young.
Darryl Young. I first met him at a con in Chicago a few years ago. Fell in love with his stuff. I truly believe he is the love child of Jack Kirby and John Byrne. That's how his stuff looked. Jack Kirby and John Byrne.
That's a high compliment right there.
It is. I want to.
Stuff is available on Etsy. He's got everything.
Right. Yeah, Darryl Young Designs. And you'll see all of his stuff. I mean, we have a set of 5 prints from him available on this initial Kickstarter. What I wanted to do though was I wanted to confirm everything that Dakota just said about these artists being excited again. Every single one of the artists who has reimagined the Golden Age superhero in their chapter has agreed to, if this thing works out for us, they want to do that hero's individual title going forward.
Okay, this is news to me.
Okay.
I wasn't actually familiar with
All
this.
right.
Every single one of them. I even have Alan Weiss was even like, well, if I'm going to draw a book for Twister, I want to write it as well.
All right.
Okay. And who am I to say no to Alan Weiss?
That's a catchphrase, by the way. He's been telling me this for like over a year and a half.
That's great. So everybody back
moving to the next subdivision next in Austin at this point.
Yeah, we're gonna have like a little mission statement. It'll say Power Comics Incorporated. Who are we to say no to Alan Weiss?
Let's talk about the Kickstarter very specifically, some technical details. This is what you have up right now, which will end on Thursday. Thursday being January 13th, 2022. It is for the first issue. Your goal was $2,500. As of the moment we are talking, you are at $22,218.
And we can get that number up, people. Those are rookie numbers, all right?
That's right.
Sure sounds to me like you already have the money for the next 4 issues.
Oh, you don't know how much these artists cost me. Come on now. Dakota Alexander alone is milking me for all he's worth.
It's not very much though, apparently.
Yeah.
So the people who get it for $6, they can get the digital version. For $10, you can buy your favorite artist a beverage. How?
I don't know what that means.
Does that work?
I still don't know what that means.
That just means you donate $10. You tell me who you want to buy a drink for. We get them to have a cocktail, take a picture, and we post it. And we make sure we tag you and thank you on our social media.
That's
so
pretty cool.
So these are called chuhai in Japan. I'm a big fan of grapefruit. I'm just putting it out there. They're quite cheap. So $10 would be like 10 of these. Just
nice,
ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
If you pledge $10, you can get the physical copy, which will ship anywhere in the world, with the cover by Stephen Butler. Another $10 gets you the cover by Bart Sears. $20 gets you both. $35, you're pretty much guaranteeing that they're going to get the digital version of the trade, right? Like when it's all done.
Right.
And $60, just $10 more, is a physical copy of the trade.
Correct.
And $75 is a physical copy of the hardcover.
Right.
I think those are pretty good deals.
I think they're pretty good deals too.
$100, you get a retail case of 25 copies of the Masters issue 1. I suppose that's for retailers.
Yeah,
it is for retailers, but I mean, if somebody wants to buy 25 copies and give them to 25 of their closest friends, God bless.
And then you got some pretty insane tiers here, which is $2,000 or more, which is everything.
Everything, and that's everything for all 5 Kickstarters. So everything is listed there, from posters and pinups to puzzles and treasury editions and Slurpee cups and lunch boxes, you name it.
And $300 or more, this reward is no longer available, is the Joe Rubinstein package, and $500 or more is a Mike Kostovich package.
Yeah, both of those are already gone, already spoken for.
Wow, cool.
Now you've gone through your goals, and so you're now at stretch goals. And your stretch goals so far have included, let me just scroll down here. T-shirts, free stickers, free buttons, free mini pinups. C2E autograph prints by Stephen Butler, Bart Sears, Darryl Banks, Alex Saviuk, and Romeo Tanghal. And then you also have trading cards. And then you cross $22,000 right now. Do you have any stretch goals you're going to be adding to 22,500?
Yeah, when we crossed 20,000, what we did was at 20, 21 in increments of 1,000 after once we hit 20, we're raffling off 5 autographed covers, prints to 5 random people who have pledged. So we hit 20, 21, and 22. So I've already raffled off 15 covers and awarded them, messaged the people, and and they're going to get those right away. They don't have to wait until the comic book comes out. I'm going to package those up and mail them to them once the Kickstarter is over and they've paid.
So again, one of the tiers is that you can get a guaranteed copy of the trade. But if for people who don't want to do that, June 2022 will be the release of the second issue. Then August is the 3rd, October is the 4th, and December is the 5th. How much of this is done?
Schedule. How much of it is done? At least 50% of each issue is complete.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you're way on track, I assume.
Right, and that's why I say tentative schedule. We may have this done before the dates.
Cool. All right, so that's great. I wish you guys all the best. I love the way everything looks.
Thank you.
Can we close off with one last question?
Sure. You can have one last question. Do you still want to hear the Jimmy Palmiotti story?
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead.
All right, I'll do the Jimmy Palmiotti story first.
Yeah.
And then we'll do the question. So I had gotten out of comic books for a long period of time. And just by chance, I was traveling. I had a layover at between like appointments or something. And I was down in Champaign, Illinois, which is the home of the University of Illinois. And I saw a comic book store on campus. So I parked, I went in just for giggles and grins, hadn't been in a comic store in a long time. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at the comic book rack and I see Daredevil by Kevin Smith, Joe Quesada, and Jimmy Palmiotti.
Right.
They had just, rebooted Daredevil. And I was looking at this like I had never seen a comic book before. It was like seeing the Gil Kane cover back in '74 of the Defenders. And I had to grab an issue and I read it cover to cover right away. And I got to get, whatever other ones I'm missing. And it totally dragged me. It pulled me back into comic books and comic book collecting. So fast forward to 2000 and probably the end of 2019, probably September, I think it was. I was in Cincinnati for a Comic-Con. And Jimmy Palmiotti was there. And I brought all my Daredevil comic books. I brought my Daredevil trade hardcover, everything that I had. And one of the cool things about that series, the Daredevil series, is that I loved it so much, I actually wrote a letter to the editor and it was published in issue number 8.
What?
Yep, absolutely.
The last issue of their run, right?
The last issue of the run.
Wow.
So I walk up to Jimmy's table and, he's got a pretty long line. He's a very, very popular guy in the comic book world, the con world. He's so friendly and nice. And his wife is absolutely lovely, Amanda Connor. And I get up to him and I put my stuff down for him to sign. And I tell him the story. I said, Jimmy, you are responsible for me getting back into comic books. I tell him the whole story. And he looks at me like, wow, man, that is such an amazing story. And he opens
Never heard it before.
He opens up my comic book hardcover and he starts like inscribing it and drawing like a sketch of Daredevil. And then I say, well, I loved it so much. I loved what you guys did so much. I wrote a letter to the editor and it was published in issue number 8. He's like, what? He's like, I'm the one that picked those letters. I said, really? We ended up, he opened it up. He's like signing it. He's like, hey, Austin, you know, you're the best, blah, 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 blah. We ended up talking like 15 or 20 minutes and took pictures together. And of course, I'm next to him behind his table by now, and I'm kneeling on the ground. And his handler and Amanda, they keep tapping him. They're like, Jimmy, look at the line. We got to go. You know, you got more people. And I looked down and the line was just, you couldn't even see the end of it.
Jesus.
And I appreciated that gesture so much that we stayed in contact. And
Very
when
cool.
I eventually did this, I reached out to him on Twitter and I said, listen, man, I'm doing this. I'd love you to be part of it. Can I get you to ink something for me? And he's like, well, I really don't do that anymore, but I'll at least ink a page. And I was able to get him to commit to 2 pages, one by Tom Grummett and one by his buddy Stéphane Roux, who worked with him and Amanda on Power Girl and Harley.
Right.
So I've got that story going for me. And that's
Very
a
cool.
pretty cool story, right?
That's going to be real interesting because, like, stylistically, they're Stéphane Roux and Grummett are very, very different in tone.
Completely.
And so it's going to be fun to see, like,
Yeah, but
how
Jimmy can ink
much-
anything.
Well, that's the thing, though.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
is that there are people like Austin and Rubinstein, they ink something and it kind of becomes theirs, but Jimmy more morphs to it. Dan Green would like morph to it.
Yeah.
And so I'm really interesting to see like how they're going to augment, you know, the pencils in the different kinds of way. You know, like I'm saying, like
It's funny you mentioned Dan Green, Dakota, because he's the guy that inked Sal Buscema on that Defenders issue.
that's right.
I first
Very
got.
cool.
That's
Yeah.
right. He was a main inker for a lot of the 70s stuff, man.
Cycling
Dan
back
Green-
to all that.
Dan Green was amazing. I
Saturday.
think he's still doing stuff out there.
Hope
I
so.
hear that I think he lives out in Colorado, but I'm not 100% sure. It's either Colorado or New York. I can never get those 2 states,
Cool.
you know, figured out.
Dan Green, when I got back into X-Men, I had an X-Men subscription. That was the Dan Green, Mark Silvestri
Ooh,
era.
Mm,
And
very nice.
Very good era.
And those are 2 dudes who really worked together. But then I started to realize like that he worked with John Romita Jr., especially when John Romita Jr. started like taking on his more original style. Then I'm seeing him doing stuff with like John Byrne for the Avengers. And then you start to realize that he's one of those people that is not a chameleon, but fits to the pencils versus someone who makes it very much their own, like Bob Layton and Austin. They were very technical and precise and all that shit.
Right.
Anyway, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent.
cool.
here.
Yeah.
No, tangents are good, man. Stream of consciousness is my strength. It's also my weakness, so I got to balance it out.
Here's my
All
last
right, what do you
question,
got for us,
guys.
Stoy?
All right. My favorite artist ever. You guys have both mentioned his name. So
Sal Buscema.
can you say some words to close us off about the great George Perez?
Gee, well, I mean, like talk
George
about
Perez,
timely-
I'll tell you, I'm going to interrupt right now. George Perez will outlive us all.
Okay,
Done.
Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed. I'm okay with that. I'm
fine with that.
I have no problem with that. I have no problem with that. Okay, well, bringing it back to Who's Who. Who's Who is probably what brought me made me aware of George Perez, especially because that was when he started taking on his newer, more, I think, iconic style, in my personal opinion. Also, a lot of those issues were inked by Romeo Tanghal. It's amazing to me when I learn more and more about what he's done, because I learned about him from that, but then I learned about when he was on Avengers, and his style and him and Byrne were kind of cut from the kind of same initial cloth in the way that they were doing page layouts. And I was a huge Byrne fan as well. That guy has done more in the amazing period of time and has, ran the breadth of style and has given so much to the community. Like everyone you talk to, they absolutely love George.
Yeah.
Everybody loves George.
Yep.
And you look at George, you look at everything about him, and you just like look at this guy, and he just like seems like the most incredibly positive presence, And
Even
you and I were
now,
talking- even
It's
now,
insane.
Yeah.
Even now.
100% agree.
I've never seen anyone like just shake it up You know,
Yeah.
and to know that he was, when I learned that his health was like saying like he can't do any more work, that became a thread for a while. And then to learn about this has just like devastated everybody. And it should, because first of all, you know, he's an incredible talent. And then you learn on top of that how much he is valued as a person to the entire field. And man, I mean, I just don't think that there's enough words that are ever going to be said about the guy. Really.
Yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly on that, Dakota. The thing about George is that it's not just his art. There are thousands of wonderful, amazingly talented artists out there that produce amazingly wonderful art. But there aren't a lot of guys who have the personality that make you not just love their art, but make you love them.
Yeah.
And George Perez is at the top of that list. One of my two favorite covers of all time, and I'm lucky enough to have it signed by George Perez. I saw him the last time he was in Chicago, which was, I believe, February of 2020, is the cover to Avengers 181. And it is just, for me, for my money, I mean, you talk about getting bang for your buck. It was probably a 35-cent comic book. And on the cover was every member of the Avengers. There had to be 30 characters on there. And it was the one where the government comes in and says, we're cutting the team down to 7.
Gyrick.
And right, Henry Gyrick.
Henry Gyrick.
So now the coolest thing about that cover, okay, is that almost there's an identical recreation of that cover inside the comic book. Rarely do the covers actually come into play inside the comic book, but this one did. And you know who drew the interior page of that was John Byrne.
Yeah, I'm looking.
So I have, what I was able to do was I found a digital copy of the Masterworks where it was recolored and high res. I printed out the cover, I printed out the Byrne page, and I got each of them to sign their page and framed them, and they're in my office.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. This was great.
All right.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Totally appreciate you having us on, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.